Welcome to Huff Goes to the Movies. My name is Eric Huffman II. Most people call me Huff. Some people know I love going to the movies. And after a long hiatus, I am back on YouTube to talk movies, and not just one movie, a whole franchise worth. It is October, it is spooky season, so it's no better time than to talk about the infamous, much loved, very successful Halloween franchise. And I would not do this by myself. There's only one person I'd reach out to for this. And that, of course, is one of my best friends, someone who's like a brother to me, and the other half of the duo known as RNC, Real Nigga Cinema, my buddy Jahshua Smith. Josh, thank you for joining me. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm gonna say this directly in the camera. Huff knows like this is the reason we started Real Nigga Cinema to get to this point. This is like Christmas.
Yes,
I feel
this.
like I have been waiting years to talk about this. There's no piece of cinema that I love to hate as much as the Halloween series. It's like The Brothers,
Oh
but a
boy.
whole franchise. I mean, like I really hate it, but I will watch it every time it comes on, no matter the movie. I can't stand it, but it's great.
And hey, you know what? I mean, shout out to you, man. You've been wanting to do this for a long time, and also shout out to the timing of this year in particular, because as I finished my marathon of the movies, the news came out. I believe I first saw it in Bloody Disgusting, but I think Deadline might have actually broke the story. Miramax has acquired the television rights to Halloween. So Halloween will be coming back in some form. They plan to do a cinematic universe. I have no idea what that looks like. I have no idea who wants to spend money on a cinematic universe around this franchise, but you know what? It's not my money, so I'm sure they'll find ways to make it work. And I
Yeah, and
guess,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
oh
cut
no
you
no
off. Go
no
ahead.
no no no, you can go.
I was gonna say, isn't the big news that it's supposed to be like the multiverse of Halloween?
I've I have heard some interesting rumors about what they want this to look like. Um, Honestly, I have some ideas myself for what I'd like to see happen with this franchise going forward. But this is a franchise that, as we get into it, has almost always been undermined by follow-ups. And as we go through the movies, we'll get into it. So, for those of you watching, Josh wanted to rank and sort of provide a tier for all the Halloween entries. So we're going to go from the beginning all the way to the most recent entry. We have not discussed each other's list with each other, though. Knowing Josh the way that I do, I think I think I could probably spot where certain films will be ranked. I definitely know what's going to be number 13 for him. Um,
Absolutely.
and so, just a quick recap of the series before we start. Obviously, 1978, John Carpenter's Halloween becomes one of the breakout horror films of that decade and really set the standard for what the slasher genre continues to look like today. I would even argue that despite it not being the best horror film of the 70s, it's the one that sort of permeates through the culture and the genre more than anything else, more than The Exorcist, more than Texas Chainsaw, more than Suspiria, even more than Alien, right? Like, I think there's something to this franchise that just filmmakers make sure to take notes on it whenever they're making a movie about people being murdered. The success of that leads to 1981's Halloween 2. John Carpenter wrote this film, but he did not come back to direct. He wasn't really interested in continuing the story of Michael Myers. And of course, a weird sense of irony in that, as he's the person who's responsible for the story thread that continues to sort of haunt this franchise all these years later, with the Michael Laurie brother sister connection. 1983, I think, is when we get Season of the Witch. It's the only film in the series that is not about Michael Myers. Originally, Carpenter wanted Halloween to be an anthology franchise set around Halloween, but with different self-contained stories. The audience didn't really turn out for this one. So in 1988, they brought Michael Myers back, as well as Dr. Loomis, with Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. This introduces the character of Jamie Lloyd, the daughter of Laurie Strode, who we find out has died off screen. Jamie Lee Curtis was on to bigger and better. She didn't want to come back for this. Halloween 4 actually tries to take the franchise in a a weird new direction, which fans were kind of on board with, but it's seemingly undone with Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, because Michael Myers won't die, and you have to find a way to make a movie out of it. Halloween 5, not a fan favorite, especially with the introduction of the character of Tina, who sort of takes a weird bit of center stage in this film. Justice for Rachel. The film ends with the breaking out of Michael Myers from jail and the disappearance of Jamie Lloyd from the mysterious Man in Black.
Do you
That, of
see how
course.
ridiculous that this sounds already? Like, I'm just
Oh,
listening to you run it down, and I'm sure they can see like the plots already.
so of course, 6 years after this, we get Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, the film that actually introduced the world to Paul Rudd playing Tommy Doyle, who was one of the kids being watched by Laurie Strode in the original film. This film is riddled with production issues. They go through a number of reshoots. I believe Donald Pleasence, I believe this was his final film role. Um, he shot for the main part of production and he passed away shortly thereafter. So they had to do a lot of reshoots sort of around what they had of him. This is the film that introduces us to the idea that Michael is cursed by this cult called Thorn. You know what? We can get into it a bit later, but needless to say, this was not quite the final chapter that fans would have hoped for this franchise. So a few years later, a miracle happens, and Jamie Lee Curtis agrees to come back with Halloween H2O 20 years later. This is the only film in the franchise, I think, about Michael Myers that doesn't take place in Haddonfield. We find out that Laurie Strode faked her death. She's changed her name. She's moved across the country. Michael Myers is on a revenge spree. He's coming to get her. And I think for a lot of people, this was kind of like this was like an early tell for what the Blumhouse films would be, where it's, oh, Laurie's back and she's like ready to go to war with Michael Myers. And, you know, it was in the Scream Kevin Williamson era of slashers, so it definitely has that look and feel to it. The film ended up being quite the success, probably a little too much so, because then a few years later we had Halloween Resurrection. Famously, Jamie Lee Curtis did not want to come back for this. She thought that they gave her a good final note in H2O, but contracts become a thing, as we have learned with the way that franchises work now. So she did come back for Halloween Resurrection, but in the cold open of the film, Michael Myers kills her, and we have a whole rest of the film to watch, including Busta Rhymes performing karate on Michael Myers. 2002 was such a strange year.
Yep. Horror in the aughts suck. Let's
Yes.
just get that out the way.
Yeah.
With
And
some
of
very
course,
notable exceptions.
yeah. And of course, this film ends with a tease of a third film that never happened because the franchise went through a remake, like all the iconic slashers did in this decade. 2007, we get Rob Zombie's Halloween. He was coming off of the mixed results of his directorial debut, House of a Thousand Corpses. Very much a different take on Michael Myers. We get a very extended backstory where we not just get to hear him talk, but like we get a sense of like who he was as a kid. We get his whole family. It's very much draped in Rob Zombie's signature aesthetic. It sounds like a Rob Zombie movie, for better and for worse. And the film had a pretty big opening weekend, but kind of dovetailed off in the following weeks. But it was enough of it made enough money for them to want to do a sequel. Rob Zombie did not want to come back for that sequel, but he eventually got talked into it. He just had to step away. So in 2009, we get Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which I I'll get into this a little bit later, but I think it actually makes the wise choice of not trying to recreate the Halloween 2 from the 80s. It has some fun nods to it, but it's very much a different movie altogether, like a very different movie altogether. This did not go over well with critics and audiences, so Halloween 3D, which was originally on the books, Rob Zombie was not going to come back to direct that, but they scrapped those plans entirely. And in 2016, 2015, we got the news that Universal and Blumhouse acquired the rights to Halloween and that they had a story pitch from David Gordon Green of Pineapple Express fame and Danny McBride. Yes, that Danny McBride. They had written a treatment for a trilogy of Halloween sequels where they were going to ignore the events of all the sequels. They were just going to follow up with the very first film. So, of course, their first film was called Halloween, which became a huge hit in 2018. One of the biggest openings ever for a horror film. It opened to like 70 something million dollars. Like, I was there opening weekend. The theater was packed. And of course, they announced that they were going to do two sequels to this, Halloween Kills, which had to be pushed back because of the pandemic. So it came out day and date in theaters and on Peacock in 2021. And then Halloween Ends, which came out at the end of 2022, also day and date. And that's essentially where we've been left. Halloween Kills takes place on the same Halloween night as the 2018 film, whereas Halloween Ends takes place a few years later. We're introduced to a new character, Corey, who becomes sort of the focus of that film. And we do eventually get the final showdown between Laurie and Michael. And yeah, I mean, I have to admit, going through all of this, I don't know if I sold anyone on watching any of these
No,
movies.
you didn't, because you know what you are actually describing. You're describing Mortal Kombat in film form, where there's all these different continuities and
Hmm.
reboot attempts because no one knows how to end that intellectual property. Like that's one of the main things that bother me about Halloween. And you'll actually see that in my rankings because there's a common theme with the top and the bottom of why those movies are so good and why the other ones are so bad.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. I say this every time that I watch the original film. It's wild to me that this is the most successful thing that John Carpenter ever did as a filmmaker. But it's not really like I think most people, if you look at John Carpenter's career, there's a very real trajectory between Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, and The Thing. And I think most people would agree that The Thing is like his masterpiece. Like that's when he passes away, that is going to be the thing on his tombstone,
It's a
director
great
of The
movie.
Thing. And it Halloween is one of those films that like it's an outlier for him because a lot of his films did not find an audience in the theater. They later sort of found an audience on video or like on TV. And so it's so strange to me that this is the thing that's kept going and that he is sort of forever tied to. And it's the thing that you could argue he's the least interested in. Like he did the first one, he was happy to do it. He tried to do other things. And listen, I think he's one of the masters of horror, but it's fascinating to me that this is one of the few immediate successes he had in his career.
Yeah, to me, I think John understood that like when you do something wildly successful like that in horror, and he knew this early, you just the more that you do it, the worse it gets because you have to kind of balance some kind of commercial appeal with critical appeal,
Hmm.
keep fans interested. I think Scream is the only horror movie that kind of understood how to do that. I'm actually really impressed as a quick tangent that they pumped out two in a row back to back and they were both pretty good because you
Hmm.
just can't do that. And it's really interesting because a lot of people talk about how Halloween set the tone for horror for years to come. It's a good and a bad thing. You don't get Jason, you don't get Freddy, you don't get the iconic villain without Michael Myers. But if you don't follow Halloween's lead, you also lose a lot of crappy stuff like Saw pumping out a movie every year or Final Destination needing to do it bi-yearly. You don't get that need. You don't get, I don't think you get the second half of the Friday the 13th because once you do it, you're trying to serve too many masters and
Hmm.
it just the quality degrades. And so I like that Halloween is this torchbearer in a lot of good and equally bad ways because that's just a testament to what he did with the first one.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard to communicate it to people who don't know this franchise or who don't know like the history of this genre because that first Halloween movie has so many like filmmaking flourishes to it that are like, oh wow, like that was like a great choice there. Like the
Hmm.
iconic tracking shot at the opening of the film and the way that the shots are composed in the latter half of the film. Like there's so much to learn from that first film. And there are a lot of cautionary tales of what would follow. So now that I've sort of recapped the series, um, I think the tier is going to be more interesting than just the ranking. So I'm going to
For
go through
sure.
the ranking. We can go from, I mean, how do you want, do you want to go from best to worst? Because I feel like you'll have a lot more to say in the bottom half, or do you want to go from worst to best?
You know what? We can do it Snake version. You do your best to worst, and I do my worst to best.
Okay, you know
Because
what?
I'm actually really excited to hear your ranking because there was one point of divergence when we were like, what's the absolute worst? And it was like, oh, this is gonna be pretty interesting.
Yes. Okay. So my Halloween ranking. The best for me, 1978, John Carpenter's Halloween.
No
It
argument
is
there.
wildly simple, but it's so well shot. It has its own style to it. John Carpenter composed the score himself, the score that has never been outdone in any horror franchise since. And despite the fact that the acting in the movie is not very good, it's just one that's always a really effective watch. Like this is one that I could cut on at any time, and I'm good.
Mhm.
Number two, I'm very curious where this one will rank for you. Halloween H2O. I think that this one is, you know, I will concede that Halloween probably doesn't need to feel like Scream. But this is one that I think it works on a fan service level. I think if you ignore how certain events are retconned, I think it has the best ending of any of them. Like it's just a straightforward, you're done. and
You
even
know,
though, and even though it has one of the worst Michael Myers masks, like this is the one where they famously had to use CGI to create the mask because of reshoots, which just never looks good. This is a fun one for me. I thoroughly enjoy H2O. I like it a lot.
your list is gonna be so much more fun than mine. I was not expecting that at number two.
You know what? And originally it was not. Originally it was not number two. Before I did the marathon.
Damn, that makes me want to throw a curveball in there.
Number
Mine is
three.
kind of boring. Ah,
No, you'll listen. You'll be fine. Listen,
nah,
number
I gotta throw some razzle dazzle in there now.
number three for me, Halloween 2018. Say what you will about how the trilogy concluded, and say what you will about the new Loomis that they try to throw into the movie. I think this one works because it's much more stripped down compared to the other ones, and when you compare the non-important characters in this film to the non-important characters of some of the other films, I think that these ones feel much more impactful when they go. So you have the very memorable motion sensor in the backyard. That's one of my favorite sequences of any of these movies. Like they just really pulled off some really great set pieces with this one. Even if you know, did we really need to ignore the continuity of all of these films to get here? I
Yes, we
don't
did.
know.
Yes, 100%.
Number four, Halloween 4. I I mean, and I've always liked this one, but I don't know that I was expecting to rewatch it and like it as much as I did. I mean, I think if you can't get Jamie Lee Curtis back, introducing a new character, I think the Danielle Harris, especially in this film, I think she works as like the final girl kid of this franchise. And even though I was not a fan of the Michael Myers mask in this one, um, I think that Halloween 4 works pretty well. And I especially love the ending, which it's Halloween. So I guess it's a common thread to like the endings that don't matter.
Hmm.
Uh, Number five, Halloween 2. Um, the brother sister dynamic has kind of undermined so much in this franchise, but I think the hospital setting is really effective. I think that this carries a lot of the tension and atmosphere that Carpenter would have had he come back to direct this one. And you know, if we're just looking at it from what it must have been like in the moment, I appreciate that they wanted to put an end to the story on this one.
Mhm.
Number 6. This actually this was not the hardest one to rank, but this was a difficult one. Halloween Kills. It's
Okay.
it's so stupid. It's like Fast and Furious levels of stupid in this movie.
It
Cuz
definitely needed like Tyrese and Ludacris in it. That's where we were at with
because
Halloween Kills.
because there are points in this movie where I go, okay, Michael Myers breaks into these people's house and he kills them. Cool. I can live with that. That's not stupidity. That's him being Michael Myers. But some of the choices they make in this movie, some of these characters, I'm like, why? Why would you do that? And this is countered with what I think is the best looking Halloween film by far. I love how they do the flashback, where we sort of flash to the after events of the 1978 Halloween. The recreation of Dr. Loomis is really impressive. And Michael Myers is just vicious in this one. It's got my favorite kill of the series, the boyfriend's head in the banister.
Yes, hands down. That
And
was crazy.
and even though she's my girl and I love her so much, I thought they made the right bold choice of of killing Judy Greer at the end of the movie. I thought, you know what? I love her. If I see her in the streets, I'm getting a picture, but that was the right bold choice to make to end this chapter of the trilogy.
I hate to
Um,
agree, but you're right. Because her
yeah.
character's so good too.
Yeah, I mean, she's a necessary sort of counter to Laurie, and the Evil Dies Tonight storyline is wildly overdone. And
Evil dies tonight.
yeah, I mean, it's now I will say it's redeemed by how they kill Tommy Doyle at the end. I clapped in the theater when that
First,
happened.
first disagreement there,
Oh
and I'll get
wow.
to that on my
Okay.
ranking. But it was a one. The fact that Anthony Michael Hall died.
Yeah.
Yes, agree. One, hard agree. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. I
Uh,
gotta save something from my side.
got you. Number 7, and this is where I should probably start introducing the hot takes. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I know. I
It's
know.
a top. It's a top. It's in my top like half for sure.
So I have some hot takes to present now, as I was saying earlier.
I'm gonna let you
Uh,
cook.
from my good friend Anna, she'll be watching this because she loves Halloween. She said, um, can't wait to see the ranking. I just want to acknowledge that Halloween is the best spooky slasher franchise ever, and
Is it?
Season of the Witch is undoubtedly the worst in the franchise.
Is it?
But we all know that Eric is not going to say that on camera. Well, I just read your hot take. It's here. I disagree with her, but you know what? I understand why people don't like this movie. But I think removed from everything else, this is a much more coherent story than a lot of the other Halloween films. I think the mask bit is a good use of practical effects. And also, this is my hot take on Halloween 3. Of all the entries on this list that aren't the original film, this is the one that feels most like John Carpenter directed it.
I agree.
And he himself might be offended if anyone ever said that to him, but you know what? I've watched enough of his films to know what they look like.
Hmm.
Number 8. Oh, here we go. Number
This is
8.
this is this is where it starts to curtail.
Rob Zombie's Halloween. I think it's a tale of two halves. There's the Michael origin story, which I was never asking for. But you know what? If you're going to remake a movie, if you're going to do something different, cool. And then there's the latter half, where it's basically John Carpenter's Halloween. I think that Rob Zombie's style mostly works in this one. I saw the director's cut when I did my rewatch, and I did not know until then that in the director's cut, there's a rape that happens in the movie, which what are we doing? But I think that Rob Zombie's very bleak, very profanity laced style actually fits with what he's trying to do as far as telling the story of Michael Myers. And I also think that the kid they get to play young Michael Myers, that was a great find. Because
Yes.
that kid looks creepy in real life. No offense to the
Yes.
actor, you did a wonderful job, but you
And you
do
got to play
look.
off your strengths.
Yes, yes. And I love I love the idea that he's always been obsessed with mask and that he feels himself sort of losing himself when he puts these things on. And the writing leaves a lot to be desired, but if you're going to go all in on your own style for what to do with like a classic horror property, I've seen a lot of horror remakes, especially from that era. It could be worse.
Yeah.
It could be much worse.
I mean, it got worse in the very next movie.
Yes,
So
it did.
you're right.
Yes, it did. Number 9, and this was the hardest one to rank for me. Halloween Ends. On one hand, I like the idea. Actually, you know what? I'll start with a hot take. I'll start with 2 hot takes. The first
Okay.
being from my brother-in-law, Christopher, who's a bigger Halloween fan than both of us.
Okay.
Why must you remind me of my frustration with the entire last trilogy? The way they ended My Boy Mike was actually depressing. The last movie should have been canceled. It wasted all the potential of Halloween Kills. Also, the score for the new trilogy was excellent, but that's it. That's the first hot take that we get for that one.
There's some huge truths in there.
The next hot take is from our good friend Patrick, who's a huge Halloween fan, who said, "I appreciated Halloween Ends, flipping a lens to how the community is impacted. It was genius and necessary.
Mm,
It was art because the franchise has always been about evil and fate, and both of those are bigger than Michael Myers himself."
mm.
So there we go. Hot
There's some
takes for
truth.
hot takes for Halloween Ends. So in
That's
rewatching this,
crazy. You know what that means is that when you take two different perspectives there, you get one mediocre ass film because
and you
it's
know
right
what?
in the
And you
middle.
know what? I appreciate the message they were going for. I think the kid that plays Corey is actually good in the role. But this is a movie that has some real structural issues to it. Like the fact that Michael Myers takes up such a small section of this movie, that's a problem. The fact that a lot of the kills in this movie are unremarkable, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
And for a film where we get to see Laurie finally get some sense of closure with this, I feel like she is unnecessarily given very little to do. So while I can appreciate what they're trying to do here, and I love that open with him when he's babysitting the kid. Like they have some seeds here that are really interesting. And I think actually now that we know where this franchise is going with a cinematic universe, I think this film sets a pretty good like template to follow of like, okay, well, we can have Michael Myers, but we can have other characters in it if we want to go elsewhere. I just think the structure of this film really renders a lot of those efforts pretty fruitless. So
Hmm.
this was the hardest one to rank. I thought it would actually be a little bit higher because it's not as stupid as Halloween Kills,
Hmm.
but man, do they spend a lot of time on things that don't matter in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, you can sense that there was a tonal shift after two that like is precipitated by the movie moving forward, but I really would have loved to have seen the original idea of it all taking place in one night. But I
Yeah.
don't know because the word where Halloween Kills goes with that concept, Halloween Ends probably we would have gotten something much dumber, I think, if that was the route they went with the
Yeah.
second
Yeah,
of the trilogy, I should say.
I could definitely see that. Though I will say Halloween Ends does have the scrapyard where he lures the teenagers and he uses the like the not the flamethrower but like
It was like blowtorch
Yes,
almost.
on the kid.
Yeah, that was fire.
Yes, it
Literally.
was. Yes. I forgot that that's how that happened. So when I was rewatching it, I was like, oh, right, that. Number 10. This is the one where I think my brother is going to be the most upset. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Whew. And
Six.
he's gonna be upset that it's not dead last because he hates this movie. And he's got good reason to, because art house Halloween is probably best left to writers and directors who are a bit more refined in their craft. I'm cool with the movie being wildly bleak and violent and like just everything's horrible, but Rob Zombie's writing really undermines so much here. You get a fun little tip to Halloween 2 with the hospital section of the film, but the way that these characters are written are just, they're not just dumb, but they're just like awful people.
Yeah, it's like I said, every horror movie in the arts, it's just like everybody's trash. You're not sad when they die, so why? Why waste 90 minutes going over it?
And also, this is more of this is more of an issue for me in his first Halloween movie, but casting Danielle Harris to play a teenager who has to run around bloody and naked, even though she's like 30 at the time, like just some confusing choices going on here.
Justice for Danielle Harris, man.
1000%.
Somebody needs to let her get one last shot. They need to do like a Wes Craven New Nightmare version of Halloween. That would really be good with her
Yeah,
because come on now.
yeah.
Come on now.
Number 11, Halloween 5. And man,
I gotta check my list. People have probably been seeing me keep doing this because my phone keeps falling. I want to see where 5 is at. Man, you had that rank lower than me. That's crazy.
Halloween 5, which honestly, I think the next two entries are much like, there's a big gap to me between the rest of my list and here, but the decision to kill Rachel, I've never heard the justification for that. Like,
Neither did
was
the
it,
actress.
huh?
Ellie Coronel didn't understand the justification, so why would we?
Yeah, I mean, and Tina is just, hey, listen, shout out to that actress. She was just doing what the script asked her to do, but having having Tina become the central focus here, bad move.
Mm-hmm.
Completely undercutting and retconning the ending of the fourth film. I mean, I just don't get it. I
Yeah.
really don't. And also, of all the movies with Loomis, of that version of Loomis, this is probably the one where he's like the worst. But of
Yo,
course,
you know what? And that's crazy because he's so like he's openly villainous in Zombie Halloween too, but he's like a jackass in this movie. He keeps
yeah,
like berating little
yeah,
girls.
yeah,
Where
uh,
is he?
yeah. So of course, I'll go into 12 and 13.
Oh yeah, because they're both like in WWE there's the Royal Rumble and you have to like it's usually the two best people at the end. Like I would love to see a reverse version of that where it's like the two people who got eliminated first get back in the ring. These movies are
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. I will not say much about this because I know this is one that has a special place in your heart, but it's just bad. And I watched the producer's cut this time, not the theatrical version. It doesn't make it much better. It has a better color grading to it, but that's literally about it. And of course, to me, dead last, Halloween Resurrection. I have a hot take on this one from my buddy
Mhm.
Chris Thomas, whose new directorial debut, Hell to Pay, is now streaming on YouTube, by the way. Um, he says Busta Rhymes is excellent in Halloween Resurrection. He's just in the wrong movie. And he also had some other hot takes that I forgot to mention, but it's not important now because I will rant about Resurrection very quickly. I don't understand. You had a script for a horror movie that had nothing to do with Halloween. You force Jamie Lee Curtis to come back for a Halloween film that you know she's not going to live through. So you take the script that has nothing to do with Halloween, you turn it into a Halloween movie, and you force Jamie Lee Curtis back for what? I I rewatched this and I was like, what are these choices? None of these characters are interesting. What is Michael Myers doing? This feels so disrespectful to all parties involved. And it's just boring. There's also that. It's also just a really
Yeah,
boring movie. Like,
it's just yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that for a film that's part of a long running franchise, it's inexcusably ugly. Like, not stylistically like how Rob Zombie likes to do his stuff, not in the vein of like a new franchise like Saw, which a few years later would sort of emerge. But like, there's nothing about this film that works. And Busta Rhymes killing Michael Myers by shocking him in the balls is like, what have we done?
Peak
Where are we?
cinema. That's what we did. That was peak cinema. This is great.
So yeah, and of course the film ends with a tease of a third film that didn't happen, and at that point I can only imagine what ideas they were trying to come up with at that point. So Resurrection to me is just like, it's unforgivable. Like it's to me it is so much worse than Curse of Michael Myers, which I already think is bad, but I'm curious now that I have gone from best to worse, if you still want to go from worst to best.
I was thinking that as soon as you popped in with H2O as your number two, I was like, we should just go straight to the tier rankings and just popcorn because that's when it got really interesting. But I think that also means your list is a little bit different from mine. Some of these we're not going to have to fight over where they rank. But now, yeah, 13-1. I got it from here, Huff. I feel like Jay and I got it from here, Huff. Damn. First off, I was sitting here as I was doing my rewatch, and at first I was like, Halloween kind of reminds me of Nas's discography. Like, there's a clear winner, there's a clear best, a consensus best at least. And then if you talk to the right person, they may throw you a curveball, and they'll be like, Stillmatic was better than Illmatic. Halloween 4 or 2018 are better than 1, but it's clear 1 is the torchbearer, is the trendsetter.
Right.
But then I started watching them, and I was like, actually, they remind me of more of like if Jay-Z kept trying to do the Blueprint trilogy over and over and over again. Because it's very clear that like the first one in every like era is the most interesting. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's always the best, but it's always the one
Mm-hmm.
that sets the tone. And the third one always fucking sucks. Like an irredeemable ass sucking. And so 13 for me is always going to be Curse of Michael Myers. Now, people who know for me, like what gets me with horror, one thing I hate more than anything, bringing characters back to kill them off. So 12 is Resurrection. We can do that. So we can discuss these both and why I hate one so much more than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Curse of Michael Myers is insulting. It's very, very insulting. I watch these movies, I get invested in the characters enough. And 6 was like a slap in the face of like so many different things. One, okay, Jamie Strode is a character. You retcon in the 4. There's still a compelling character there with a story to tell. That's how you kill her. Like nothing of consequence happens with that character. She's your niece. She gets abducted. She gets impregnated, and you kill her on a corn thresher in the first half of the movie. What the fuck? Who cares? Why did I watch her for 2 and a third movies for us to get there? Literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I get some of the limitations with like Donald Pleasence and his character. If someone dies, you kind of have to wrap that up. I thought that is an off-screen kill. You can only do so much with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Tommy Doyle thing was a nice callback, but ultimately, who cares? This was a
Yeah.
lot. So, but I will take boring and resurrection over openly insulting. I was like, nothing between 1 and 6 matters because of 6. That's why they rebooted it a second time. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's the movie is the reason that they've been trying to reboot over and over and over again. No one knows how to fucking end this franchise. And like so many character motivations just dead end here. Like, okay, so you pull the man in black out of your ass and you kill him. Was that that's the strobe lights, right? Where it's just like, or is that 5? No, 5 is he blows up the police. We'll get there.
Correct. Correct.
6 is, oh yeah, let's kill off everyone who matters as a villain with flashing lights. Why?
Yeah.
You rob everybody of any kind of catharsis. There's just nothing to get from the film.
Yeah.
Resurrection is like, okay, you brought back Jamie Lee Curtis to do nothing, but it does have one redeeming point. I'm gonna ask you this question. We can get into it in the rankings. How many black people died in the Halloween franchise until Halloween Kills?
Just are we including the Rob Zombie movies?
No. Okay, so how many black people died in the Halloween franchise until the Rob Zombie movies?
2.
I thought it was 0.
Well, no. Okay. Well, so with Resurrection, there are 3 black characters.
Oh well, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm messing it up. Like, all
Yeah.
right, so fam, if you're black and you're a rapper, you're gonna succeed, and that matters to me on a personal level because I'm both of those things. Busta Rhymes beating the shit out of Michael Myers is inspiring for one. For two, that alone in terms of entertainment, him doing karate is, I mean, it's insulting on like I don't know, on an intellectual basis, but not to my core as a moviegoer. And that alone puts Resurrection above Curse of Michael Myers for me. But you're right. Most of that movie really sucks because it's boring.
And
Um,
you know
Go ahead.
what? What's interesting about that? I don't know. There's a guy on TikTok or Instagram who like has been revisiting movies from like the early 2000s or whatever. He recently rewatched Save the Last Dance, and it immediately made me think, oh wow, Sean Patrick Thomas being in Halloween Resurrection must have been a huge get for them in the moment. Like, oh, we got the dude from Save the Last Dance. Like it's on and
Save
popping
the
now.
last kill.
Right. Yeah. I
Oh
mean,
man.
yeah. And hey, I think you raise a great point about feeling insulted as a moviegoer and as a fan because Halloween 6, it almost feels like they were trying to insult the fans. Oh, there's a cult. There's a curse. Jamie
Fam.
Lloyd doesn't really matter in this movie. And Dr. Loomis is almost a non factor here. Like, there were so many moments in 6 where it's like, come on, you can't make that choice, right? Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because it makes me want to rank 5 a lot lower because I feel like 6 is like devoted to cleaning it up, but it doesn't clean it up though. It doesn't clean it up in a way that like makes sense or is interesting or smart. So it's worse. I'm sorry. Like and in fact, let me look to see where I can loop that in because my number 11 is Zombie Halloween 2. It just doesn't matter. And yeah, you're right. There was just it's so poorly written. It's very nondescript, but once again, nondescript can like be better than openly insulting. I just walked away from that one being like, okay, is that Taylor Compton? Is that how you say it? Is that her name?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because I remember it was like one they were doing all those remakes of horror movies, and I felt like every heroine had like a hyphenated last name. I could also be making that up too, but I feel like there was a commonality there. And she was just like, I don't care about you as Laurie. Malcolm McDowell was fantastic as Loomis, though. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, if you write the character in five like that, then five is a better movie, and two doesn't feel like I feel like that was the one redeeming factor of two. It was just like Malcolm McDowell openly like just hamming it up on screen. It was like Nicolas Cage levels of ham. And I can respect that because it made what was otherwise a really boring, unrewarding movie a little bit better. For me, 10 was ends
Okay.
because once again, they don't know how to end this fucking franchise. Like no one has gotten it right yet, except for Halloween 3, because you know what they figured out? You can't end the Michael Myers part of it, so do something different.
Yeah.
Um, Halloween ends, there's some things that I like that they did well. I think that Patrick hit on what I really liked about ends, and that was like things matter. You cannot convince me that Michael Myers would terrorize the same place over and over and over again, and there would ever be some sense of normalcy. Now that I've seen some like real life horror this year, I'm kind of like, yo, people just never go back to forgetting. So there are
Hmm.
little things like showing the picture of Karen on Laurie's dresser.
Hmm.
There's like really like consequences there, and I really enjoyed that. I don't even think the Corey thing was terrible per se. It was definitely better than Jamie. I mean, but it was just done so poorly. And at the end of it, you kind of feel like that was like a here nigga damn type of ending. It's like he's dead. What else do you want? It's like, no, there was so much that was set up that went nowhere. Like I thought that the granddaughter of Laurie um was going to have more. I know she like helps in the end to make help Laurie finally do the deed, but it just felt so cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember after the 2018 film, a lot of people thought that they were going to sort of follow up on how we thought Jamie was going to go with the
Hmm.
granddaughter, but I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, I feel like I feel like that actress had a lot more she could have done in these movies because I mean I
yeah.
actually liked Andy Matichak is the actress's
Hmm.
name, and I liked her quite a bit. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like
Yeah,
we
yeah.
we got something going here.
And that was the thing with 2018. They set up. I kind of thought I liked the idea of the three of them making it to the end, and then maybe Karen goes and like, because I think ends then ups the stakes during the third movie to kind of be like, all right, granddaughter and grandmother have to kind of figure this out.
Yeah,
But they just didn't go that route.
yeah,
And yeah, there's just some things that the pacing is just really off there. And I think that's probably the movie that suffered the most from like COVID and having to kind of figure out how not to do it all in one night. But
yeah,
I'm also pretty glad because there's a part of me that also thought that like, if you have to try and immediately follow two in the same night, it gets way too contrived and then you get a five or you get a six.
yeah.
Speaking of five, that would be my number nine.
Okay.
There's, I think there's two things that I think makes five rank a little bit higher to me than six and some of the others. As much as I hate that they killed off Rachel, and I thought that she was such a great heroine that if you're not gonna do Laurie Strode, like there's such a difference in those two characters
Mm-hmm.
that she had so much more to go. I do fuck with the idea that if you don't see somebody for a year and they catch you by surprise, it's not going to be a dramatic struggle. You just don't go. Like your guard is down. I thought that was really unique. That is the kind of kill that if you have to do something like that, you save it for a kills, or you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to bring back characters like that, that's why I always said there's a fundamental difference between Alice and Friday the 13th 2. If you're going to just bring back a character to kill them off, that was probably the best example of that in horror. Because who would ever think that Jason? She didn't have any reason to think he existed, And
Yeah.
similarly, I feel like Rachel could be on guard for the rest of her life, but if you don't know where he's at and it's a year out, there's more than a notion that like he would just catch you. I
Mm-hmm.
hated the decision, but the execution was done well. And uh the chase sequence towards the end with the was it a dumbwaiter or was it just like a
Oh yeah,
laundry
yeah, yeah,
chute?
yeah,
That's really good horror right there.
yeah.
I also read that like he almost killed like Danielle Harris doing that, but you know, I feel like she was giving such a tour de force in horror as Jamie in that movie. She really carries what otherwise is a piece of shit. Man in Black, terrible idea.
Yeah.
Killing off important characters like Sheriff Meeker off screen, terrible idea. And I think they said
Yeah.
they shot a scene and it was like deleted, but I'm like, why would you delete that?
Yeah. Yeah, that one was some questionable motivations going into 5.
It just
Um
doesn't make sense.
mhm.
Yeah, and I know that like some of the producers talked about how much they regret the execution there. So I don't think, I mean, okay, there's other things about it that I'll save for the rankings when we kind of go more in depth. But like, yeah, 5 at 9 for me.
Okay.
So okay, 8. I'm looking 8, 7, 6. Let's do it in order. At 8, Rob Zombie, Halloween 1.
Okay.
It reminded me of what I liked about The Devil's Rejects. Like you take some very one thing Rob Zombie has like a knack for is taking very abhorrent characters and giving them just enough death that they make sense. And Michael Myers just never really scared me as a child because there was too much that like logically I was like, is never gonna happen in my world. People don't teleport. He doesn't care about black people. He only is in Indiana. And so the idea of giving him a little bit of backstory to show how cruel he would be and the reasoning was almost like, oh shit, like I
Yeah.
would be scared of that. And I think the only thing was that I was waiting for him to go full zombie in the movie, and he just saved that for like one more movie. And then I was like, damn, I kind of got what I asked for, and it's really, really bad. So, it makes you wonder, is it closer to like Gus Van Sant Psycho, where it's just like, this didn't need to happen. You didn't need to remake this movie tit for tat. Or is it more like enough of a spin that it's good enough? And that's why it's kind of near the middle to me. I could watch it and
Yeah.
take umbrage with it, but ultimately I think it did some things right. It did quite a bit right for me. It's just kind of like to me, that's where it'll be interesting to really look at a tier ranking because I think it and some number 7 are like the end of the passable for me.
Mm.
Um, Smack dab in the middle, number 7, where I think it belongs, Halloween 3. I
Yeah.
know like historically people are like, it's so boring, it doesn't have Michael Myers. Good. We needed a film without Michael. One of the most interesting things Halloween could have been like a Fargo-ish type of anthology of horror. And I know a lot of people are thinking we got that with American Horror Story and that still went off the rails. And I'm like, yeah, because the more that you do of something, and if you have to do it almost every year, it's gonna suck at some point because you
Yeah.
run out of ideas. But I could really get that down with the idea of every 3 to 4 years, Carpenter stepping in and doing something new and fresh and
Yeah.
attaching Halloween to it. And this movie is hammy, first off. It's like peak 80s ham horror. It almost feels like one of those like boarding school type movies that they were pumping out co-ed slumber party type stuff with the acting.
Ah,
But
yes.
there's some interesting cliffhangers there that I think that if they would have followed up with this particular story, they could have made a better film. What happens with Homegirl being an android at the end of the movie? Like, there's a place to go with that. We're not sure if the main villain is dead. There's the implication at the end of the film that all the commercials like didn't all get pulled. So a lot of kids may have died. There's just a lot of jumping off points there. So it's mainly bad to me because it stands alone. I could totally understand why someone thinks it's the worst in a franchise, and I could also understand why people think it's one of the best because it just stands as an island in between all the Michael Myers stuff. And that's really hard because it just leaves a lot of what ifs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I'll leave it there. We can, of course, break it down more in the tier rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I said that was number 7 for me, right?
Yep.
Actually, I said that was 8. 7 is no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't math well. That's why I rap. Um, Number 6 is Halloween Kills. That is a movie that it infuriates me a lot. But I think some of the infuriation is just kind of like it's a movie where more of the positive outweighs the negative. So I'll start with pros and then cons. Pros is that's the most violent movie in the franchise to me,
Yep.
hands down. Like, there to me are 2 movies in the history of cinema where I was in the comfort of my own home and they they got me. One is No Country for Old Men. If you watch that movie I was watching it on, I want to say like a 20-inch flat screen, and I was shook. I was like, oh my God, great movie.
Yeah.
Now, Halloween Kills, I watched on a Sonos system on Halloween by myself. There were some elements it wasn't night, and that was what was crazy. I watched it at like 12:30, and I was still kind of like, ooh,
Yeah.
just violent. And I don't mind a horror film it's not comically violent. It is really like, yo, motherfuckers pissed off Michael Myers, and a pissed
Yo,
off Michael Myers is hard to deal with.
when he breaks into the old couple's house and he
Yup.
just is testing out the knives on the dude.
hmm
Yeah. I remember in the theater that was like the thing that people were like, "What?
While
What?"
while his wife is dying and bleeding, watching, and I was just like, damn, this is a lot. Then, uh, pro is Karen's death, man. Love her character. But once again, like if somebody's got to go to up the stakes, that's how you do it. I love
Yeah.
the call back to how he killed his sister. That was just
Mhm.
a beautifully shot movie, and
It's the best looking film in the series to me.
yeah, and there's enough comedy in there that doesn't feel out of place. And also, they brought back my guy, the sheriff. You know,
Oh yeah.
I was like so many times like they built him up as such a big character in the first one, and then I'm like, okay, he's dead. Um, and it wasn't a bad death, and I'll get to that later. But like the fact that he survived and there was that much care with a character, I'm like, horror should always do that with characters, whether they survive or not. Like you should care about people like you would in a thriller or a suspense, because like if it's just cheap, then you get soft.
Yeah.
Let's bring in a new group of terrible people and
Mhm.
kill them, and no one cares. It's about, ooh, the traps are shiny. And Halloween, I think, is better. And those are also the kind of things that really makes ends suck because it's like they just go nowhere. Um, Cons, the whole subplot with the Disturbed Man. I'm like, it
Yeah.
literally adds nothing. Nothing at all, except to show that like this crowd is full of people who are stupid and terrible. And when they blow their 27-3 lead at the end of the movie, it was almost like it was funny as opposed to like, and I think that's part of what they were going for. Um, Also a con, bringing back characters to kill them off in ways that were like,
uh
I was like Tommy Doyle, fun because it's Anthony Michael Hall. You can kill him in a million movies and I'll always be happy. But also like it's Tommy. Like imagine if Friday the 13th did that with Tommy Jarvis. Everyone would be sitting there like, damn, that's crazy.
yeah.
But I also didn't gain anything from it. Sheriff Brackett, all these characters that could be doing something different. Also, Lindsay Wallace escapes. Nothing and ends. Cool. She's out there. She's
I
alive.
I won't front. I wasn't upset about it when I first saw it, but doing the rewatch, I was like, man, my girl Marion they really just had to take her out.
But I like that a little bit better than H2O, but because she gets a chance. But also H2O, her kill is kind of awesome because, you know,
Tone
that's how
setter.
you exactly.
Tone
Right,
setter.
right, right. So kills was just kind of like I think it was fun enough and it wasn't offensive. It was just like, man, talk about like characters like just literally being ineffectual and not really, like there was a lot more that could be done.
Yeah.
So, all right, 5, 4, 3. I think I can memorize it from here. Five is H2O.
Oh wow. Okay.
It is good as a 90s slasher. Did it have to happen? No. But that Marion kill really, I was just like, good grief. Like this is gonna be a little bit of a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then it just settles in some ways that I'm like, it's kind of unsatisfying. The Josh Hartnett part is like, um,
You
you
know,
know,
I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot to say this, I think, when I was going through my rankings. That was Josh Hartnett's first movie, I think, which is nuts.
that was the first thing I remember seeing him in, that and The Faculty.
And also, I believe Kevin Williamson wrote that one.
Yeah,
Um, and I always forget that Michelle Williams is in H2O.
and she's good in it. After that,
Yeah.
she was doing her thing, and I guess that probably based on me not having as much to say, probably seems like it would be lower on my list. But honestly, like it doesn't do a lot wrong at all. It just I think it's a well shot movie. It's a well written movie that really just because the follow once again and like it suffers from having interesting ideas that go nowhere. So when you watch it again, it's even hard to get attached because you're like, you just know it's going to go nowhere. Um,
Yeah.
and that kills it for me on a rewatch. Where some of them I think they just work better as standalones. So that's why I think it's other than Zombies first, it's the one that ranks the lowest for me as far as the first in the era because it's just like, man, Halloween Resurrection just did nothing with it. Um, I even think it could have been stronger if you're gonna kill Laurie, let that be the epilogue of H2O, and then it's probably like near the top. You
Oh
know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, number funny enough, number 4 is 4, and that was the razzle dazzle.
Yeah.
That was the razzle dazzle because I kind of wanted to put it at 2 after hearing you put H2O that high, because 4 is not bad.
No.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There are characters that you care about. There's a final girl that's cunning and smart, and um, even the dynamic of like a foster sister and a younger foster sister
Hmm.
that straight up the older sister does not like this girl, is blaming her for a lot going wrong in her life. But when the chips are fucking down and Michael Myers is coming, not even coming to get you, coming to get you because he's trying to get to his niece. And she was just like, this family, like, look, I'm gonna shoot the fair one. And man, the rooftop scene. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's just even the ending, I think once again, it only feels cheesy and out of nowhere because there's no follow-up. But
Yeah.
if we look back at the movie and where it went, that would have been a much more compelling route to go. And then you don't have to rely on Michael Myers so much. You can probably bring him back for 6 or something after, because that actually worked really well with Friday the 13th, having one non-Jason film. People tend
Hmm.
to regard that pretty well because it was a twist.
Yeah.
And then excuse me, when Jason comes back, he comes back with reason and purpose. Friday the 13th is underrated. I'd love to redo one of those because I even think Jason X, like, that is a very well done canon.
Yeah.
That's my hot take. It's much better canon than pretty much any horror film from that time, even Nightmare on Elm Street. But yeah, 4 is great. It introduces some good characters. I think about how much 2018 benefits from that movie. You've got the dynamic with the sleazy boyfriend, but also the best friend who's actually a ride or die that made a mistake. And so like when they die, it's almost like, those are some well-written characters
Yeah.
that just didn't make it. And I like that in horror. Like it, I think that it's a tone setter for what 5 and 6 could have been. And if they had not had their feet to the fire of having to do Michael Myers stuff, we could have got a really good trilogy there that might have ended it. And
Yeah.
for me as a moviegoer, you could have ended that in the 90s. But then again, I guess if we hadn't messed it up so much, we wouldn't get my number 3, which is 2018.
Hey.
Another one that could have been 2. That's like the like magic for Nas. Like it's like, oh, you got me. I thought maybe I didn't know that you had another like bona fide classic in there for you. 2018, I think for me, having the benefit of being born at this point, and seeing a Halloween movie in the theater when it premiered, it hits everything right. I dug all the character motivations. And this was the one hot take I'll share is my barber, Wayno, member of the Black Pack, and another Eric, shout outs to Grand River Barber Company.
Hey.
We were having this conversation, and one thing that other Eric said was he didn't like the true crime link, and I said, to me, that was a great commentary on where we were going with true crime, where it's just like these podcasters, these amateurs are gonna go wake the sleeping beast. Like, why would you do that?
You know
that
what?
that was where the genre was going.
And honestly, so you have Halloween 2018 ranked at number 3?
Mm-hmm.
So do I. And I think part of the reason I don't have it higher is because as much as I like the true crime thread into it, I wish one of them would have lasted a little bit longer in the movie.
But that death scene is so good. Well, it's sad, right? It defies a couple of horror tropes where it's just like you're so used to a character like that who's like dying, not being dead.
Yeah.
I thought it was one of those things where I was like, Michael's not fucking around. He just like killed this woman, and the guy can't do anything because he's Michael Myers. And I was like,
when he drops the teeth in the stall. Yeah, man.
That whole gas station bathroom scene, what a terrible place to die. Could you imagine being in Michigan and you go to one of those like bathrooms in Wixom, and then like Michael Myers is just like, oh, this is where you're gonna die. And you'd probably be thinking of those last like 2 minutes, like, did I do anything of worth in my life? Like,
right.
this is for real here? Off of a back road here?
I don't even get the nice joint in Brighton. It's got to be here.
Yeah, that alone would make me fight. Like he'd have to split me all the way down. It would have to be something people remember. Jahshua fought. But that I dug. There was just so much, and I'll leave it there for when we do the ranking because there's so much more I could go on about what I liked about it. And once again, my now wife, I'm escorting her home, and she lives in this apartment where it's on at that time there was just one light on the street, and I just got home and I was like, ooh, you sure you don't want to stay somewhere else tonight? It's a little dark outside. And that's as a grown man, like that's the kind of feeling you kind of want from your horror. It had me thinking, it had me reading whatever I could. And I didn't get that with my top 2, which I know I would have if those things would have existed. But it was really nice being able to see a Halloween movie I really liked in the theater. Yeah. So, I think that's one, if you cut off the ends and you didn't have to do a trilogy and it just ended with Michael, that would have been perfect. That would have been the beautiful end to it. But of course, you can't.
No. And
So
just
yeah,
before you go on to your top two, I just want to say Jason Blum has spoken at like length about some of the big horror films that he missed out on as a producer, like not getting involved. And it's part of the reason that he felt so impassioned to like get involved with Paranormal Activity, I think is the one that he finally like sort of took off for him. Um
hmm
it's wild that he, regardless of how the trilogy went, I really do think he kind of solidified himself as like, no, if you're trying to make a horror movie, you come
yeah.
through here.
Blum, A24, or the Aster is just like the chokehold that they have on horror right now is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and much like four, two and one are two and one. Like, um, two works really well as an immediate follow-up to one.
Yes,
And
it
it's
does.
sad that four and six just goes in a different direction. I mean, I would say watching two again, and after all these years, yeah, the brother sister thing it only feels hokey because of all the bullshit that comes after it.
Yeah.
If you ended at two, it's a great film, great franchise. Go
Hmm.
somewhere else with it. That's why three is okay because like you just got to go in a different direction from there. And
Yeah.
then maybe with four and six, it could just literally be that like Jamie was possessed, or you could do something silly there. And
Yeah.
that makes for a good twist to know that that character in four is like evil all along. That would have been like crazy, you know?
Hmm.
So I think two has all the tones of a concrete ender that just suffer from what comes after it. And I don't have to explain one. I think you covered it really, really well. I mean, one of the best things about that movie is that, like, if you follow that formula, think of how many movies start off with it's not too bloody, it's not too gory, it's really suspense, um, and thrills in a horror setting. So like you do all the who's gonna die next, but like I look at like Saw one compared to what it would become, even like with the new Saw 10, it's just like there's a lot of emphasis on gore and violence as opposed to what is the central motivation of these characters. And
Hmm.
I think the same way that I think that Michael is scary when you know and you have a reason there, I think he's equally scary when you don't know. But you can only do that so many times, you know, like the
Yeah.
first time it's just like, oh, he's this malevolent force of nature. That's just cold. Like to watch it in reverse and to have all the right notes hit without having to dress it up, it's great. It's just that like if you keep doing that and you keep doing that, and then it just loses its value each time. So yeah, that's my ranking, 13 to 1. Fuck Curse of Michael Myers. God awful film.
Hey, you've reached the end of this first part of the discussion. When we originally had this talk, I didn't realize how long that conversation would go for, so I split the video into two parts. The second part of our discussion should be up on my channel by the time you're seeing this. Just check the channel, you'll see it in the recent videos. If you haven't already, please do consider giving the video a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below with your ranking of the Halloween franchise, and of course, check out part two. If you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the support. To my friend Jahshua Smith, thank you so much for having this discussion with me. It was a lot of fun. And if there are any other movie franchises that I should be checking out, that I should be doing a ranking for, you guys let me know in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. Once again, my name is Eric Huffman II. Most people call me Huff. I will see you at the movies. Peace.